Hey guys, and welcome back. So I know I did mention on my review of the finale of the 7th and final season of the 100 that was probably my last The 100 video, at least the last one that had to do anything with the final season of the series. But then looking at the comments, I started thinking, okay, there are a lot of comments that kind of sound the same, comments that needs responses, basically questions more or less. So I'm going to answer these questions over the course of this video, and in case there are questions that have not been answered by the series, I'm going to try to explain why they haven't been answered. So to get started, I'm going to talk about that one comment. It's not really a question, but it's very important to talk about over here, which is, I think a better ending was blah blah blah. And there are so many better endings apparently, based on all the people who commented on my video. I'm not thinking of a better ending. I'm always thinking of whether this ending suited the story, what the message was that the writers were trying to deliver, and I did like all the messages that they did try to deliver over there. I did get the messages. So with this ending, for example, the message was, no bad deed goes unpunished. It's not about the use of celestial beings, beings who play God. These beings are a means to an end. They're not really the end game. The end game is for us to realize that no bad deed goes unpunished. And while Clarke has done a lot of good in her opinion and a lot of things for certain reasons, family, people she loved, her people, she did not always do it right. And in the end, that led her to making the wrong choice during the test. Killing Bill Cadogan while the test wasn't going. But there's also the other message. The other message over here happens to be that these people were thankful, were grateful to Clarke. They came back because they were grateful for everything that she did for them. And even if her decisions were wrong or selfish, she's always made those decisions to protect them. So yeah, they were grateful for that. That's what made them come back. That's a good message as well. So the people who think Clarke should have been punished, I think the feeling that she was gonna be alone was quite the extensive punishment before she realized they came back. And also, even though we know that Maddie decided to stay because, Clarke wouldn't have been happy if she came back, she would live an unfruitful life, a life without love, as Lexa did express to Clarke. That, by the way, answers the question of why Maddie never came back. Lexa actually gave the answer on the episode, because this is one more question that a lot of people have asked, but that as well was kind of bittersweet to Clarke. She's never gonna see Maddie again, she's never gonna watch her grow, all of that stuff, she's never gonna watch her fall in love for the first time, but at the same time, she likes the fact that she's gonna have a life. So pretty much it's kind of a conflicting situation. She's gonna love it, but she's also gonna hate it. But here though is another comment, one that's not really a question as well, but does need a response. Bellamy died for nothing. Clarke shouldn't have killed Bellamy. Clarke was horrible for killing Bellamy. At that moment she wasn't really thinking. I've always voiced it. She could have killed him later on and it would have made a lot more sense. Like when he tries to stop her from saving Maddie when she goes for Maddie in Bordeaux. That would have made a lot more sense. Because yes, it didn't achieve much, but in the end it did achieve something. I mean, that's the one major thing that's always going to be hanging over Clarke's head. That's the one thing that she regrets the most, and she does voice that on this finale. Another thing about this whole Bellamy's death is Bellamy would have let Cadogan torture Maddie. We know that. He was willing to do that with his friends. He would have been willing to do it with Maddie. He was a fanatic. He was a huge believer. That also brings us to the question of whether Bellamy and Cadogan would end up being considered the good guys. A lot of people have always said that they were the good guys, that Bellamy was always good or Cadogan was also good, but there's always the same point that I try to prove about Clarke that I need to prove about these two. They're not really the good guys. I mean, Cadogan is a bad guy, but Bellamy has not always been the good guy, and neither has Clarke been. It's the same problem. You can always be right about what's gonna happen, transcendence and whatnot, and both of them were right about that. That does not make them good, because they chose the wrong means. Cadogan chose to torture Maddie, to almost kill Maddie, and if she would have died, he wouldn't have cared, by the way, which would have also meant that she wouldn't have transcended as well. Cadogan was all about personal glory. He wanted to see this for himself. It's his curiosity. That's even what Lexa says at the very end. You are a curious race indeed. So yeah, Cadogan was curious. Nothing more, nothing less. All the for all mankind BS, that was all BS. BS that he made in order to make sure that he's got followers. Build up a stack of followers in order for them to do his dirty work at some point, and in order for him to fight the war that he is going to start. So the answer is no. Cadogan might have been right about transcendence, but he's not right in general. He's not a good guy. the probable willingness of Bellamy to let Maddie get tortured, because we know he probably would have let her get tortured based on what we saw a couple of episodes, like actually one episode before he died, that also indicates that he wasn't going to act like a good guy. In the end, he was right about transcendence, but he was not going to do the right thing. So yeah, he's not perfectly good. Again, not saying that Bellamy was evil, saying Cadogan was evil, but Bellamy was not in the right state of mind. And I did explain repeatedly why he wasn't, like the psychological state that's basically by the book, the psychology book of what happened to him on Etheria. But okay though, Leisha KJ, hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, in the comments to my review video did state it's supposed to pull everything together, but it seems kinda strange to me. If Cadogan and co were right, then we can assume that Murphy was right too. When they die, are they going to hell? Now, I think the answer over here is it depends of how you want to look at this, because if you're looking at the surface, yeah, you're correct, it means that they're going to hell, but that's only if you're looking at the surface, like at that one statement. But then if you think about the repercussions of that statement, you would realize that statement does not relate to what happened at the end. Not at all. Okay, so how does this work? Now, simply put, this was a statement at the beginning of Season 6. The statement was about Murphy seeing his future, after he dies, he would go to hell, and that's the Murphy that we did meet at the beginning of Season 6. The Murphy who still had a lot of bad to him. But that Murphy has been evolving for a long while before, and at that point as well, this was a reason for more change. I mean, yeah, it led him at first to kind of betraying Clarke, the whole Prime thing, taking the mind drive, but nonetheless, that was only a stepping stone, that was a first step, because that was Murphy being Murphy, choosing himself first, being selfish, all of that stuff, and that's what he did with the situation with becoming a fake Prime and taking a mind drive. But then though, there was Amori, the one that balances this relationship, deciding this is not right, we should protect Clarke, we should save Clarke, and that's exactly how Murphy came around, how he ended up coming around in the end, and then from there he decided, okay, I cannot do this, I cannot protect myself from death, so let's try that other thing, being the good guy, the one thing that I've always done in the end, but I've always resisted at first, and he ended up becoming the hero on Season 7, the good guy on Season 7. So the dream was not about where he's going to end up or where they're going to end up as of the end of Season 7, once they die, but it was rather about the motivation, something that was very exclusive to Murphy. Seeing that vision or that dream kind of led him on the path that ended up with him being the person that we do watch throughout Season 7 and then the end of Season 7. Someone who sacrifices eternal life in transcendence in order to be grateful to Clarke. That kind of person. The person who's not as selfish as that person who took the mind drive on Season 6. Still though, on Leisha's comment, those beings allow them to transcend and become like them, but what about all the millions of people who came before, the saints, the pacifists, and people who did good throughout their entire life? Okay, they do not end up in hell, but they don't necessarily end up transcending. We know that they don't end up transcending. I think the only major problem over here is the ending would have sucked if they brought back all those people, like allowed them to transcend, and then most of the characters that we've met since the beginning of the series, the characters that interacted with Clarke and that liked Clarke, would have ended up coming back to Earth out of gratefulness. I think it would have been a bad ending. I think I would have personally hated it, because that would take away everything, all the impact of all the deaths across the seasons, like for example Abby's death, Kane's death, her father's death, everything really. So I think this was a pretty solid ending in that one sense. I think it also avoided the whole, they all transcended, but Monty, for example, and Jasper did not decide to come back, which would have opened Pandora's box. A lot of people would have been complaining at that point. So yeah, not the perfect scenario, but I prefer it over that Pandora's box getting opened. Once again, Leisha KJ's comment is pretty solid because it kind of gathers a lot of questions that were posted on other comments, so I'm going by this one comment for the most of this video. Now, I just realized that I might have been pronouncing her name wrong. I think it's Lisha, not Leisha. However, though, the next thing that she states over here happens to be that she wonders what would have happened if Becca would have touched the 7 silent symbols in a different order. Where would that have led? I think the answer goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Some things are not the objective of the series. Some things are a means to the end, to the story of the 100 and the story of the Grounders and the people that we've known for so many seasons so far and the villains that have been introduced this season. For example, the episode of Anaconda. The entire objective of that episode is 1. A backdoor pilot to the prequel series, and 2. Introducing Callie, because Callie would end up being the judge of Cadogan, would explain a lot instead of just showing up and us not knowing who she is. In the same fashion, the stone was but a tool to show us how villainous Cadogan is, a tool to give control over the anomaly, give us the anomaly and give us that white portal at the very end that leads to Judgment Day, or the final test. I don't think anything else matters. I don't think if she would have clicked them in a different fashion, in a different order, it would have mattered, or it would have created something different. And that's simply because she was listening or watching the right order through the flame in the back of her neck. So there was probably no other order. It was this order, and that's it. Now let me put it this way, the flash to Clarke from the beginning of the series, something that Lisha also mentions over here, I don't think it means that was out of the imagination of Clarke, or that Clarke was being tested, or that, she was in some sort of MCAP over there. I think it was just a flashback to tell us that was the start, and this is the end. This is where she started, someone on the ark, and now she's right here. There is, of course, no comparison here because The Godfather, a movie like The Godfather, is in a totally different league. But remember that scene at the end of The Godfather Part 2? Michael Corleone at the dinner table, talking to his brothers, talking to his brother-in-law, his sister, every one of them were there. And his brother, who back then did not like that Michael Corleone, who would in the end end up becoming the head of the Corleone family, he did not like that he was totally away from the family and did not like their ways, gave him shit. That scene, that moment was there to tell us what a long, strange trip it has been for Michael Corleone on the movie, and of course for Clarke on the series. But I will circle back to the whole not everyone transcended thing because it is something that Lisha kind of focused on a lot in that comment, and I'm going to say one thing. The fact that they did not transcend does not necessarily mean that they cease to exist. Maybe there's another place, maybe there's a better place, or a similar place where people who died before the test kind of go to. The good go to one, and the rest go to another. I don't think the test was just a one-person test. I think Clarke failed right away because she did not even pass the personal test, but there was also a test for everyone. And we got to that test because Raven was able to handle the situation differently than Clarke did. Raven went in there, Raven did explain that she understands, she knows that they are selfish, she did admit it, but she also admitted that we're capable of change. We're capable of doing better. Kind of reminds us of Monty a little bit, but that's not the time for that. The thing is, at that point, there was that phasing into the situation on the ground, and that was the test of everyone else. And we know that Octavia kind of managed to control that situation. So yeah, one person might go in to take that test, but the entirety of humanity was tested at that moment, putting down their weapons. And it's not just Octavia's words, it's not the greatness of Octavia, but the fact that humans are capable of changing, of doing the better thing, the right thing, if they actually slow down for a moment, calm down for a moment and think. One side was ready not to shoot, and the other side just needed to be reminded that one of them was the brother of this girl, and also the fact that they've always been doing this for all mankind. Felt at that moment, even though Bill Cadogan was dead, that his teachings is the thing that came back to bite him in the ass. Like even if he were to be still alive, his men, his army, his disciples would have put down their weapons, and everyone would have been able to catch up with him. But Lisha's final note though, they disappeared and turned into orbs of light. Does that mean that they still have the longing for love? So is that just the remnant of their bodies left behind? And the answer is yes, they still do have the longing for love. That's explained by Lexa in the end. Because they had a choice to come back to Clarke, that means that they longed for Clarke. So they do have that longing. They probably have a life as well over there, on that other side, the light side. Because as explained by Lexa as well, Maddie's reasoning for not coming back with the rest was that she knew Clarke would not like it if she did not have a full life. If she did not fall in love, find love, all of that stuff. That means that all of that stuff is actually possible on that other side. So yeah, it's still a full-fledged life, only without them being in these meat sacks as Shadeheader refers to them on the 14th episode of the season. But to respond to Lisha, no, the Primes were not right in their way of, resurrecting themselves and living forever. Imagine if a Prime were the one to take this test. They would have definitely failed it. transcendence in what happened at the end does not mean that ALIE was right either. I mean, there is a major difference between the City of Light and the transcendent world or transcendent universe, because simply put, ALIE's world, you had no choice, you had no feelings, you had no memories if I remember correctly, but over here you do have it all. You do have the memories, you do have the feelings, and you do have the choice, even to the point of choosing whether to stay or to go back to that other life. In the end, let me put it this way, whatever your religious views are, whatever your thoughts are, no one cares about these celestial beings. Once again, those were a means to an end. They were there to send us a message by the end of the series. No one cares about these stones because the stones were again a means to an end. No one cares about the events of Anaconda. Whatever happened to Reese? No one cares about that because that's not part of our core story. All of these things were a means to an end, including with that last one, a little bit of a road to a prequel. In my opinion as well, Bellamy's death, the death of any character or the life of any character, does not really matter in the bigger scheme of things because we're watching the story of all characters, we're watching the story of this group, the events that lead to more events, and we've got to watch the story for the story, not for a single character living or dying. Death in the end is a natural end to life. Now about the no offspring part, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, everything has to come to an end. Everything that has a beginning has an end. Even humanity is one day gonna have an end. I believe so. I mean, we're already doing a lot of things in order to make sure the end comes faster, but nonetheless, everything that has a beginning has an end. Again, the tagline of The Godfather 3, I'm really obsessed here, but nonetheless, if that wasn't the end, if their return meant that they could repopulate Earth, then we are in the same cycle. Then the test didn't matter, the transcendence never mattered, it's all like it never happened. But that's kind of a little bit silly. But having said that, though, my work here is done, so let me know in the comments down below if you have any more questions. I'm gonna try to respond to most of them in the comments. But over here, I try to respond to all those questions that were repeated and repeated over the course of so many comments on my review video. Let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it one of those much appreciated likes, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I upload a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, the 100 or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in to this one, stay safe, and have a great day.